Welcome to Rough Cuts, everyone. It's March 16th, 2025. I'm Jonathan, Sports Cards and Sunsets, here with Matthew, 1956 Tops Guy, and Nate in Cardboard Veritas. And a bunch of our buddies from the Instagram card collecting community are jumping in here for the YouTube Live. Awesome to see you, Tony, Southern Collector, Luke, Bleecker Street, Litzy Sports Cards. We're really excited about this discussion. The three of us, along with our collecting buddy July Tango Whiskey, decided on the top dozen cards of the golden era of baseball would be a great list to put together. So we all did a lot of our own research, put together our own lists, and then we got together kind of as a pregame and just hacked it out. We debated it. We compared our lists. There were some no-brainers, and there were a lot of tough calls. Wanted to kind of start with what the ground rules are before we jump into the list, and then we'll hit some honorable mentions and count down 12 to 1 after that. First of all, when we talked about what is the golden era, there was even some debate around that. If you look into it, we all agreed that it was really post-war. So you're talking really the first major baseball set, other than some oddballs, is 1948 until, when. And the until didn't end up mattering all that much, because once we got to the late 50s, the candidate cards started being pretty far down the list. But I think we all kind of thought the golden era is probably late 50s or early 60s. And there were a bunch of different things we kind of all took into account when putting together the list. So Nate, why don't you jump in and share kind of how you thought about some of the criteria? And then I want to hear from Matt, too, on how he thought about the process and overall what the challenge was here.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, the exercise was not to come up with the 12 most valuable post-war golden era cards. I think obviously we could do that list. So we wanted to, for the list to be a little more nuanced than that, certainly. We wanted it to be representative of the era, I would say. So, for example, we wouldn't ideally have 6 Mickey Mantle cards on the list. We wouldn't ideally have 6 1952 Topps cards on the list. We want some key sets to be represented. We want key players to be represented. We want different styles of cards to be represented. Those things are all important, but most important still is we want to have the best cards. So I think that's kind of the starting point. But it's not just, there's, maybe a way to think about it is, one of the ways I thought about it in putting together my list was kind of like putting together USA Olympic basketball team, which is, you don't just pick like the 12 best American players in the NBA. They kind of have to fit together. Like, it's probably among the 20 best American players in the NBA, but you need a defensive specialist, you need a shooting specialist, there's a little bit of, it kind of has to fit together well too. So I'd say that's some of how I thought about it.
Right. Yeah. So as Tony points out, Matthew's going to have all 1956 Topps on his list, mostly Cubs. So, it was very tempting to do that. It was I definitely took the view of, if, I'm trying to explain to somebody this era of cards who's not in the hobby, I kind of wanted this set of cards to be kind of like the most important and kind of tell the story of that era and cards in particular, the stars of that era, and kind of all have it fit together in a kind of cohesive kind of story, right? And as Publius points out, this monologue definitely a rationalization of what is about to come. Yeah, it's this is the disclaimer part of the presentation. But no, it's really like, I felt like it was really important to tell the story of the era. And kind of think about, what were the best cards. Josh Schneiderman asked what years make up the era. Yeah, we were kind of thinking post-war to kind of, wherever it goes, you're kind of thinking like late 50s at least, maybe into the 60s. But yeah, you kind of want to get like, what were the big stars? What were the key sets? And kind of condense that into kind of these 12. And so at least for me mentally, it was really a picture of like, yeah, trying to explain to somebody, whether it be my wife or someone who's kind of, into sports or whatever, what's the group of cards that tells that story the best and the most powerfully. And it was really hard, right? It's kind of easy to come up with the cards. It's very difficult to put them in an order.
Yeah, a lot of the fun was, I'm reminded of this on the day that the NCAA brackets were set. There's all this debate around, what's the 10 seed and the 9 seed, and the last card in was actually not the 12 spot. It was higher. It was on the 10 seed. We'll get into that too. I'll say this. There were a lot of cards that didn't make it, that it was painful. But one of the biggest reasons some cards didn't get in is because we had too many from a particular set, or a particular player already represented. And yeah, I did my nominations by, I looked at all of the major card sets from 1948 to 60, put candidate cards in, and then oddballs. And after my first go, there were some big sets that just didn't have any player on the list, and I hated that.
So painful.
And other things that I took into account. I did take value into account. It just wasn't, in the seating, like it's a factor. It wasn't the factor. Mm-hmm. And also aesthetics. We all had some cards that we just willed to be in the list, or at least we wanted to, because they're just such beautiful cards. So there's a bunch of a bunch of factors, and it was hard to do. 12 ended up feeling like a low number. We weren't able to get everything in that we wanted, which is why we're going to have some honorable mentions. Any other introductory thoughts before we jump to honorable mentions?
Yeah, I just want to get into this comment from Publius, which is really accurate, right? Which says that sounds like you're curating, not ranking. I fully endorse this approach. It's definitely it's a ranked curation. So we're like when I hear the word curation, I think about museums, right? We're going into this museum of baseball cards. We're going into the golden era wing. And, what is the set of cards that tells that story the best? That's kind of my mental model for this.
And when July Tango Whiskey, when we were talking with him, I remember him saying, it's almost like we're saying, if you were starting a golden era collection and you wanted to have the best cards, like the best collection, the best cards, these are the 12 you'd have. And so it's not going to be all 48 Leaf or all 52 Tops, because you want to have it be well-rounded, but you want every single card to be a banger. And on that point, we're going to jump in. So we have I think we have 5 honorable mentions or honorable mention categories. And the first one is kind of a July Tango Whiskey special here. He has a gorgeous copy of this card. 1952 Bowman Stan Musial. This is a card, and Matthew and I are both showing ours, that just in terms of the art, the artistry, the colors, an amazing player who has a lot of great cards, but not as many as you would think for a guy who played that long. But I tried to will this into the top 12, and it just kept not making the cut. And we said, all right, it's got to be an honorable mention. In part, it kind of hurt that 1952 Bowman wasn't represented on the list, and it's such a gorgeous card. And then we talked about Musial as well, and you're like, what card of his should be on? Is it the rookie, which is black and white, from 1948? Is it his Leaf? But this is one that we all kind of thought was the best Musial card. So honorable mention, number 1.
Yeah, maybe just to add on there real fast. It's like Musial had to be on there because he's such an important player from the era. But this card in particular, and JT, is a big proponent of this card. It's just like, from like a compositional standpoint and a color standpoint, it just feels like, like dictionary definition of a baseball card kind of thing. It's very striking, and it's a lovely card. It's definitely a lovely card. And Tony highlights that the 53 Bowman Musial, also a classic, and 53 Bowman we will talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
And next, I just want to say too, Jonathan, to your prior point about it being a painful exercise in some way to make cuts, I think that's a good thing, right? Like that's what made it interesting. If it was a list of 20, it would have been a lot easier, and the cuts would have been a lot less painful. And I think ultimately the list would be less meaningful. So I'm glad we all had some really painful cuts. The 52 Bowman Musial was not a painful one for me, and Jonathan, I might have been part of the resistance on this one, I think. And what you said, I think, is right. Like for me, it was just too hard to figure out. Is it this card? Is it his Red Heart? Is it his Leaf? Is it his 53 Bowman? It would, if Musial had one card, and I think the Musial card that could have been on there is if his 48 Leaf had been a short print. Like that Musial card would have made the list probably, but given he's kind of a little underrated and given he just doesn't have one card, it just didn't quite, wasn't quite able to emerge. And then just one other thing I wanted is just shout out here some of the folks that have joined us. I know we said hi to Tony, Southern Collector, and Chris Publius, our buddies are in here. Luke Bleecker Street has joined us and said what's up. Litzy Sports Cards is in the chat. Josh Schneiderman. Guys, am I missing anyone here?
I see David
Mookie
Chase.
Chilson.
We got Publius, Chris, Mookie Chilson.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so we're getting some great questions and comments here already, and appreciate all you guys joining us.
Absolutely. So let's hit the next honorable mention card. Nate's going to talk about it. It was another one where there was a player where we realized they just weren't represented, in part because no one card stood out. But Nate, you hit it.
Sure. And this one is really a player and a set that kind of hurt to leave out. So it was the 1950 Bowman Yogi Berra. And, Yogi is someone that all three of us really enjoy collecting a lot. And many people do. He's kind of a sneaky popular guy in the hobby. I think everyone feels like he's underrated, but the people who collect him are really passionate about doing so. And then 1950 Bowman is a really popular, really beautiful set. I know, Matthew, you have particular affection for that set and the Jackie card in it. And, the Ted Williams is a great card. So I think it hurt us to leave Yogi out. It hurt us to leave 1950 Bowman out. And in particular, that Yogi card aesthetically is such a beautiful card with Yogi in the catching pose, with the field in the background, the blue sky
park.
Yeah, right. Classic from that early Bowman era. So that was another honorable mention.
Yeah, and what I think I've harped on this point a lot in the past is that, like, from a development of cards perspective, it really stands out as the first card set that had like the detailed color background, right? So it kind of like feels like the first kind of full art card. I don't think it really gets its due in the hobby, sadly. So that's why Yogi's there.
Yeah, and it's so right that it was about, it hurt to leave Yogi off. And 1950 Bowman, I mean, some of us have talked about that as one of our favorite sets ever, and it just didn't quite have a top 12 card in the set. Hey, Mike Petty, thanks for joining us. We're doing honorable mentions here before we get to the countdown. Josh, good to see you as well. So let's see. Matthew, you're going to hit the next honorable mention.
So this was a tough honorable mention, and it's there it is, the 1953 Bowman color Mickey Mantle. So obviously Mickey Mantle is going to be discussed again later on as we go down the list. And the reason I kind of pushed hard for this card, it wasn't in my top 12, but it's a really important card to the hobby in the sense that, this was the first set in the era that used a color image. And I think I heard it on another podcast somewhere that, you can imagine like kids across the United States, they're obsessed with baseball, obsessed with the players and Mickey Mantle in particular. And, a kid gets this card. This is the first time they would have seen like what Mickey Mantle actually looks like. Right. And of course, like Topps moved over to this in 1957. But that Mantle card is really special, not only because of the photo piece, but also just like, it's an interesting image. The fact that they chose to like put him, over on the side instead of centered, it's a really cool stylistically. And it's a card that I don't own, but it's like rapidly rising on my list because I do think it's pretty important to the overall like story of the hobby.
Yeah, we're getting some comments of folks in the chat. A little text here, probably his favorite mantle. This was the first big mantle that I bought. This used to be my Instagram thumbnail. It was this picture. I love this card so much. I couldn't say it any better. Just the quality of the composition of the photo is so great. Just young Mickey Mantle taking on the world. Such a beautiful card.
Yeah. And as you said, Matthew, this isn't the last time we'll hear about Mantle. And he's one of the toughest because, views really differ on kind of, I think his top two cards are pretty clear. But after that, it gets really tough. And I think, depending on the collector you talk to, there are any of probably 4 or 5 cards that could be kind of next on that list. And there are a lot of people that, as we've just heard from a couple, that put the 53 Bowman. There are many people that put the 53 Topps as their favorite Mantle card. So there's a lot of discussion around the best Mick cards, and there are a lot of them to choose from.
Yeah. I've gotten a lot of good comments on this one too. It's people saying that's my favorite looking Mantle card from David Chase. Mookie Chilson references the fact that, hey, I pulled that card in 1989 Bowman. I'm pretty sure that year, right, they inserted like the old classic Bowman cards. Yeah. So that must have been pretty cool to pull in 89, even though those damn cards were too big to fit in sleeves. And that fact like broke my brain. I was so mad about that as a kid. And then Mike Petty's giving me guff about, getting busy, getting the 53 Bowman. I'm looking, man, but I'm particular on the eye appeal, so it's definitely got to be the right one. I've also got some cool some comments from Instagram. Space Bear Card says, I bet that was huge for those kids, referencing seeing Mantle for the first time. And then Insta account haver, he references they used Top Flight photographers as well on that 53 Bowman set. A few folks that shot for Life magazine. So I mean, it definitely comes through in the set, right? It's striking imagery in these photographs, and it's a hell of a set, and also no name, just the image, which is pretty cool. Oh, wow. Earthquake. You guys probably saw me shaking.
Yeah, that came through. All right, we're going to give us real-time updates on aftershocks.
Yeah, I think we're okay, but just, yeah.
Oh, why?
Maybe like 4.
Oh, that 5? Literally was, Matthew?
That was an earthquake, really? Yeah. It's like 4.5 to 5 probably.
Wow.
No, it was an earthquake.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, Mike Petty says he feels it.
Wow.
All right. Stay safe, everybody. Watch the photos on the walls or the artwork. All right. Let's keep going with the honorable mentions. We got 2 more. This is a protest honorable mention share for me because these were both on my top 12. And I can't believe these beautiful cards didn't make it. But we got Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams from 1948 Leaf. And these are 2 of the most beautiful baseball cards ever made, gents. And it hurt to leave Joe off the list. There were some arguments made by some people who outvoted me. But look at these 2 guys. Maybe we'll see one of these folks on the list later on. But 48 Leaf could be the greatest set in baseball card history. These are 2 beautiful cards from the set, although not as valuable or perhaps important to the hobby as a few others from the set.
Yeah. So
Jonathan,
go ahead, Nate.
I was going to ask Jonathan a follow-up question. I know it hurt you a lot to have you didn't leave them off, but for those 2 cards to not be on the list, did it hurt you enough that you have trouble co-signing the list? Can you still feel good about where we ended up with those 2 cards?
Disagree and commit, guys. Disagree and commit. I'm a team player. I'm a co-author on this list, and this isn't the first time in my life that I've been wrong. And we collectively, just got it wrong with this one.
Nice.
Yeah. Some of the conversation that went on when we were talking about these cards were, in particular, with respect to Joe D. Whether or not we should think of him as being a golden era player or not. So that was a big part of the conversation. And, a big piece of it was the fact that, at least in our estimation, the 48 Leaf Joe D is a pretty sweet card, but it's not his best card. It's probably, it's definitely not his best card. It's maybe arguable, like it's a top 3 card of his. So that's why we were kind of like, well, it's not really his best card. He's really like a World War II kind of guy. And so that was part of what kind of like pushed him out of the top 12. But this was a card that wasn't in my original top 12, but was, readily convinced that we could move it out. And then the Ted, I think we'll get into a little bit later why exactly the Ted Williams didn't make the top 12, although it's pretty close. Yeah. And Mike Petty says he needs to get busy on the Williams. Yeah, Mike, this is a card that you ought to have, man, because it is freaking sweet.
The Ted hurt me more than the Joe. I love the Joe, but that Ted may be aesthetically my favorite post-war card. I think it probably is. Like just pure aesthetics.
Yeah,
It's
you're
incredible.
you're totally right on that, Nate. Like, we've often talked. It looks like a movie poster, right, made by Warhol or something.
Yeah.
It's just a fantastic card, and every time you see one, you're like, dang, that's nice. And you got so a lot of people talking now that, hey, like if this is what is an honorable mention, the top 12 better be dang awesome, and that's right. That's definitely right.
But that wasn't the most controversial card to not make the list. Nate is going to talk about the most controversial card that didn't make the top 12.
Which I'll adopt your terminology, Jonathan. It's kind of a protest presentation by me as well here. So the 1955 Topps Sandy Koufax rookie did not make the list, and as you said, Jonathan, that one engendered a lot of discussion and debate. We talked about it generally. We also pitted it against at least 2 or 3 of the cards that ended up on the list directly against each other with a lot of discussion. We reopened it after the list had been closed, and we still couldn't quite get it on. And, it's from the 55 top set, the first horizontal set, a really important post-war set. Obviously a tremendous player, one of the most collected post-war players, probably top 5 or so, collected player. And, I think folks can probably guess if that one's not on there. No Koufax made the list. So that was a tough omission because he's a really important player, really important card. Also, it has a little extra importance to the Jewish card collector community. It's
100%.
a card that's often given for bar mitzvahs and passed down among generations. And we considered that, and we added that element in, and we still just could not quite get this one on the list. But it hurt me to leave this one out. That's for sure. I'll say a couple things that I think hurt it. I don't think that the design and the aesthetic stand out. It's fine. But of the 55 Topps cards, the yellow ones, maybe other than the Hank Aaron, kind of generally get a little less love than the other colors because it sort of fades into the border, and it's just not quite as striking. And then also the population on this one is really high. The PSA pop is over 11,000, which would have made it by, I think, quite a bit the highest pop on the list. That doesn't necessarily exclude it in and of itself, but I think it just maybe makes it feel a little less important to some people because it's so readily available. So those were some of the dynamics that stood out to me in that one.
One thing that
I think
go ahead.
you got to say he's probably the greatest living player from the era now. He's such a living legend. Pitchers were so underrepresented on the list too. For me, the fact that it's just a batter's list for the most part. It hurts to leave off. This is the first big vintage rookie I ever bought, and I think the pop count favors the card. Just like Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. rookie. Like the fact that so many of them are graded and so many of them still remained is because kids loved this player. They kept it. They sent it in. It's not crazy expensive, but it's just one of the key rookies of the era.
Yeah, I think a big thing for me with the Koufax is that there's 2 things. Like, number one, I don't love the image on the card. Like, it doesn't I guess speak to me very much. Me being a 56 Topps guy, that also makes it challenging because I like his 56 Topps so much more. The other one too is that Koufax wasn't a good pitcher in the 50s. He wasn't. Look at the numbers, right? He became an excellent pitcher, right? In the early 60s. And of course he was super dominant kind of once he got there. But at that time, he wasn't. It took him a few years to become the pitcher that, is referenced in The Big Lebowski in terms of talking about Judaism as being, a beautiful history, a beautiful, rich history from Moses to Sandy Koufax. But I would agree that of all the cards, this was the single most painful to leave off the top 12 for sure.
All right. I think we're ready to dive into the actual top 12, and I'm excited to get feedback on the last card in, Mr. Irrelevant. Matthew, why don't you talk about it?
All right, this is going to be fun. Okay, so the card that is the 12th card is the 1953 Bowman color Pee Wee Reese. So this card, for me, was like a must-have in the top 12, in the sense that I think, this is the prettiest card ever made, in my opinion. You've got this amazing, I think it's a spring training image of Reese, hopping over a sliding player, and it just looks like artwork that someone would have on their wall. And it's from a collecting point of view for people who love the aesthetics of this era of cards. I think it's key. It's really a critical card. And at least for me, it was pretty easy that this card beat out the Koufax, but I can see that, we got a number of detractors in the audience probably who are like, I'm not sure if this one really does beat out the Koufax. But for me, in telling the story of this era of cards, this 53 Reese is just such a pretty card. And it's, part of it, the reason I like it about it is it is affordable. And I think it's emblematic of the era. And yeah, I just love it. So I was really willing to fight for it to be in that top 12.
Yeah, I willed it onto my list as well. And it is broadly considered to be one of the most beautiful cards of all time. The photograph is so amazing. It might be, if you just look at values and say, hey, value is a good indicator of demand. A PSA 4 that's centered to this card might fare pretty well against a PSA 4 of a Koufax. I'd have to look it up, but it's got some value too. It's not such a dark horse.
Yeah. And I initially had this one on my list, and it was 12th on, when we made our own lists. I ultimately, through our process, I'd say was indifferent, maybe leaned a little against it getting in at the 12 spot, but I'm totally fine with it too, because it's clearly one of my favorite cards from the post-war era. And I think, thinking about the aesthetic, one of the things that's so unique about this card is, I think more than probably any other, it kind of outpunches its weight class just based on its aesthetic. I mean, Pee Wee Reese, it's kind of remarkable to have him in our top 12, right? Like,
yeah, right.
I think probably clearly the least known and least accomplished player in our top 12. I'm pretty sure. And, in this card, if it wasn't for this aesthetic, would probably sell for maybe a quarter or a fifth of what it does. And so I think what we, to recognize that, and to also have the 53 Bowman set represented, which Matthew, you also talked about in the context of the MIG. So pure aesthetics, revolutionary, important set, just unbelievable look, card that's important because of how it looks. And, I think that's why it ultimately got the nod.
We have a couple fun comments that really appealed to me. One person said, who was it? We better see the 58 Brooks Robinson on the list. That was Tony, Southern Collector. That's the fart face Brooks Robinson, and I have a copy of that. And somebody else said, I'm sure there'll be multiple Don Mossies. And I don't know, Pat Riley, if you know, but I'm number 3 on the PSA set registry for Don Mossy. True. Look it up, Johnny V.
There's a deep appreciation for large ears.
Oh yeah,
in this group.
The deep cuts that are coming out of the chat are really wooding me at. So.
Awesome.
Should we keep going?
We have
11?
Yeah, we have Chris Publius saying he's filing an appeal in Koufax versus Reese, which could have anticipated that there may be an appeal coming on that one. But
I look forward to the documentation.
We'll stand by it. So, all right. Yeah. So number 11 on our list is, I think, one of the really rare examples that we have of a post-war, very rare and scarce chase card, kind of. You might say it is. And this was one that we debated very heavily against the 48 Leaf Ted Williams. And we ended up going with this, which is the 1954 Wilson Franks Ted Williams. I think we feel for the most part like we made the right decision with this one. So less known, less visually recognizable to collectors probably than the 48 Leaf, but a card that I think a lot of collectors spend, particularly advanced collectors, spend a lot of time thinking about and wanting to get in their collections and, working toward. And, we felt like we wanted to have Ted Williams represented. It really came down to the Wilson Franks or the Leaf. The Leaf, as folks may guess, has some other representation on the list. And with the Wilson Franks, it wasn't so much that we wanted to represent that set, but we felt like this card did a good job of representing kind of as the pinnacle of the food slash regional slash oddball issues that were so important during the golden era. And in particular, that year, 1954, where we had the Wilson Franks, Johnston cookies, Dandy potato chips, Red Heart dog food, in addition to the Tops and the Bowman sets. So it was just an unbelievable year for cards, led by these oddball issues that, really were kind of the best of any time during that period. So we wanted that to be represented. We wanted Ted, and we liked the fact that it was a chase card.
And right now, values significantly would tell you that the Wilson Franks is in higher demand. That's not what it was about for me.
Yeah.
For me, it was mostly about wanting the oddballs and the food cards to be represented. And I think I speak for all of us when I say we just love hot dogs.
I mean, yeah, I will say too with this one, when I first sat down to make my list, I had the 48 Leaf Ted on there. And then I was starting to think about, I looked at my list and I asked myself, okay, does this list tell the story of cards from the era? And then I realized, hey, we're missing food cards. And, I think that, while they're not maybe the most widely recognized, they is an important part of the story of cards in this era, and is a demonstration of just how popular cards were in this time, right? That they were so popular that they started getting, with freaking hot dogs and chips and all this kind of dog food, right? And then there is no, in my opinion, food card that is better than that Wilson Franks Ted Williams. I mean, I loved I think about the Red Heart Musial. That's another one of my favorite ones. But that Ted Williams because it's such a cool image and it's so funny to see the hot dogs there. I mean, it's just such a cool card. And that was the only thing that gave me comfort in taking the 48 Leaf Ted out, was having that Wilson Franks Ted in there.
I think the Bond bred cards might get some collectors might advocate for the Yogi or the Jackie as well. But yeah, for me, it's the Wilson Franks.
And the Johnston cookies Hank Aaron because it's a rookie card too. That's a pretty good one from the same year as well, but not quite on the level of the Ted.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was just a team set with the Johnston cookies as well. It was a Braves team set.
Yeah.
All right, number 10. So this, with the NCAA tournament analogy, I think oftentimes the last teams in get a 10 seed. You'd think it'd be the 16 seed, maybe a 12. But in this one, the final debate came down to Koufax at the 10 spot, or this card, which I argued to omit. I'm holding up a 1952 Topps Willie Mays. Beautiful card. We debated it vigorously. I have a nice copy of the card, and I love this card, but for a few different reasons, it was hard for me to put in. Willie has a better card, and there were multiple 1952 Topps cards that I thought were better deserving. But after going back and forth, and we even did consider values, I mean, I think this card is probably 10x the value, maybe 6, 8x of a Koufax. And Willie is arguably the greatest player of the era. And so we thought, he probably should have two cards in. So, I don't remember. Why don't you guys jump in and say more about how the debate went? But I capitulated and happy to hold up my Mays.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a combination of, greatest player of the era. It didn't feel too painful to me to have like, more than one card of him in the top 10. And just like, most important set of the era, that's not arguable. I feel like I couldn't like live with myself if the 52 Mays like wasn't in like the top 12 cards of the era. Just like that like would break my brain. And yeah, he like, he doesn't Willie doesn't always have like, the his face in a lot of the images is not like great, right? But like I've always just loved this card. There aren't very many cards that have like that deep kind of purple background, and it's just a freaking classic, man. It's just a freaking classic. I just couldn't deal with not having it in the top 12.
Yeah, Litzy Sports Card says whoever at Topps decided purple backdrop deserved a raise. Willie pops out. That's true. Yeah, I think that really is part of what makes that card stand out. And obviously the set and the player are the top two things, but that rare purple background that he stands against is pretty cool. For me, one of the things, because I had this on my list as well and wanted it in. One of the things that struck me about this is I have a PSA 4 of this card, and whenever I've shown it in any way on Instagram, I feel like I've gotten a disproportionately strongly positive response to what I like. This card, I feel like evokes really a lot of positive emotion from collectors. And I don't know if it's just the folks that I happen to interact with, but like probably more than any card, it exceeds the level of like feedback and love that I expected it would whenever I show mine. And that just kind of shows me the level of emotion and, collector spirit that there is behind that card. So that was something that was in my mind as I was making my list and arguing for it to ultimately be on.
I love the amount of controversy and disagreement that we're seeing in the chat. Multiple people have also said that it's a constipation face that Willie has. So I think I might do an Instagram post that has my fart face Brooks Robinson with my constipated Willie Mays as kind of a pairing. I'd never thought about that before. So that's the counterpoint on this one.
I just feel like when I see his face, I don't think of like constipated Willie. I see like someone who just like wants to kick your ass. Like,
Locked in Willie.
He's sick of the BS and he's ready to go like kick your butt. I mean, it's just a combination of like 52 Topps and Willie Mays. I mean, it's just those two words. Like it's kind of hard to disagree with that, in my opinion.
All right, Matthew, why don't you hit card number 9 on the list? This was another one that I recall there was a lot of debate around.
So this one, I actually had this card higher on the list than where it landed up at number 9. And this is the 1949 Bowman Satchel Paige. So this card is a big deal card. I think, Satchel Paige, such a fantastic figure in the era. Obviously, dominant before the war, not allowed to play Major League Baseball before the war, has very few cards, right? There's this one, there's the 53 Topps, there's the, 48, 49 Leaf, and, some other cards. And so like Satchel, like had to be on the list. He's got kind of at least two, I would say, amazing cards. And also, 49 Bowman is a pretty important set. This is the first set where you've got Satchel, you've got Jackie, you've got the Dobie card. They tend to be, more accessible, obviously, than the Leaf cards. So like, the Page Leaf card is a ghost card, right? Very few of them exist. Same with the Dobie. So that makes them, highly desirable. But it's funny too, right? This Bowman Page is actually a short print. It's less common than most of the 49 Bowman cards. And when you see it, you think about the other thing too, is that, the Indians won the World Series, right, in 48. And, this card always makes me think of that. And it makes me conjure those images of, when it was announced that Satch would start and 70,000 people show up at Comiskey and all of these kinds of things. So, and also, I think we've talked about this before, also one of the coolest backs of any card of all time. Talks about how Satch is, one of the most fabulous characters in baseball. Just a really cool card, and obviously Satch is a really awesome, it's just a really amazing character, amazing story. So for me, this one had to be on the list.
There's some good controversy in the chat. So Luke Bleecker Street said, over the Leaf, and that's where a lot of the debate was, which was, Satch has 2 rookie cards. So does Jackie, by the way. Can you put them both on? Do you have to pick one? I was of the mind that you had to pick one, and I would have picked this one. I think it's a better looking card. I think it's more iconic because it's not so rare. It's so beautiful. I love the colors of the card. Others in the room argued that the Leaf has to be on as well. You have to stay tuned.
Yeah, we will.
And David Chase makes the counterpoint that at least his eyes are open in the Bowman card, which I think is a shot at the Leaf where he's laughing with his eyes closed.
I love that too. His exact age is not known, right? I mean, it's just such a cool card. I remember when I got this card, like how special it felt. Like, it felt as special as getting like a 52 Topps Maze. It's yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, Mookie says 49B is my favorite set. I won't argue. So,
and if we didn't put this on, if we didn't put this on, that set wasn't going to be represented.
I think some of our most interesting discussion and debate were around the 2 Satch cards, and I feel like some of our greatest variability was there. One of them could have ended up really high. We might have only ended up with one. I don't think we were gonna. I know we were not going to end up with no Satch cards. We were going to end up with 1 or 2. Which order wasn't necessarily clear. Where they end up on the list, might have varied up to 6 or 7 spots depending on who was talking at the time. But I'm happy with where we ended up, and I'm happy that this card is on the list.
Yeah, good comment from Joshua Thomas. Says 53T deserves a shout out too. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we wanted to shout that one out, and 53T has some amazing cards, and it was really trying to get down to 12 from this era. You got to make some tough decisions, and then all of us definitely favored the Bowman over the 53 Topps. But I do love that card, and it's certainly his most accessible.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna get to number 8 on the list now, and this one, surprisingly to me, was not at all controversial. All 4 of us in the discussion placed it high, and I'm holding up 1952 Topps Jackie Robinson, which interestingly is card 312 in the set. So it was right next to the number 311 Mickey Mantle in every sheet where it was cut. And, very similar card, red next to the cerulean blue. And when we talked about Jackie and, what of all of his cards, which one was kind of definitely above the line or which ones, we all had this one. And, and for me, that's kind of why I was lean out on the Maze. Because 311 and 312 are just so high. If you look at my Instagram page, I have 2 cards pinned to the top that anybody who looks me up sees, and this is one of the 2. So I love the card, and obviously I think Jackie Robinson historically is probably the most important player of the era.
Yep. Yeah, and he has so many. Well, he has not that many cards, but such a high percentage of them are really revered and heavily collected and loved. But it's interesting when you come down to the discussion. I think it becomes clear in a group of collectors fairly quickly, most groups of collectors, that he has 2 most important cards and 2 most popular cards and 2 most significant cards from that era. And, and this is clearly one of them, given the set, given the short print, just like the Mantle. I think the population on this is about 1,500. The PSA pop, the Mantle's about 2,000. So it's actually even more rare than the Mick. And, it's just one of those cards that I think so many people who collect in this era, and collect Jackie have right at the top of their list of favorite cards in their collection, or if they don't have it yet, card they most want to add to their collection.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too, because right, you're like, people in the chat are like, obviously bang, that card's worthy. And it's funny because, we're at, number 8. We're at number 8, and it's the 52 Topps Jackie. Like, that's how tough it is, right, to get into this very inner circle, right? We got Josh Schneiderman saying, can we confirm no players have double ups in this list? We will definitely have some double ups in the list,
but no triple ups. So that was the debate, was a player could have 2 but not 3.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, again, just to kind of reiterate some of the things that Nate said, it's like Jackie Robinson, second biggest deal player, certainly of the era, certainly the most important from like an American history perspective. And then you've got the set, right? 52 tops. And then you got on top of that, the card looks amazing. You got that bright pop of red. I remember, when I got this card, I was like, holy smokes. I really felt like now we're cooking with gas, right? Like this is a really big deal card. And yeah, it's a stunner. Love that card.
By the way, we haven't mentioned it yet, but a cool thing about the discussion was it occurred to us as we were going that at least one of us owned every single card on the list. And I don't think that was because of bias. But it certainly made me feel like I was in good company. So Nate's the only one of us, I think, that owns the number 7 card. So we'll let him share that one.
Yeah, and Jonathan, that's a good point. And I think we all really tried hard to be as objective as we could. We have our favorites, right?
Yeah, it's tough.
And you can't totally eliminate that. No, nobody can. We have our biases, but I think we tried to think about it from an objective standpoint in terms of pulling together a group of 12 that fits the criteria that we talked about, while trying to eliminate as much as we feasibly could our own biases and preferences, and certainly trying to not take into account like whether we have the card or not. As you say, we happen to have, all the ones that ended up on the list, but I think have the ones that just missed the list too.
And not any single one of us has all of them.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah. So I'm a little surprised actually that of us, I'm the only one that has the number 7 card on the list, which is the Clemente. This the 1955 Topps Clemente rookie, to be clear. This one, we had a little bit of discussion on this. I believe it was on everyone's top 12. No, was it not on yours, Matthew? Okay, yeah.
It was like 13 or 14.
And yet we didn't kick him out of the club.
That might be some 56 versus 55 rivalry going on there.
Got it.
Right. But yeah, for me, I actually had this a couple slots higher. I think I had it at number 5 on my list. I think Clemente's place in the hobby is massive. I think this is very clearly his best, most desirable, most collected, most sought after card. I think the green in 1955 is one of the more aesthetically pleasing colors. It's kind of dark here, so you can't see mine too well, but I think a great looking card of an incredibly important player. One of the 3 guys that has a statue outside the Baseball Hall of Fame. First Latino superstar in the game. Just a god in Puerto Rico and a massive icon to Latino ball players. And, we've seen the incredible growth of the importance of the Latino ball player since Clemente. Also tremendous humanitarian. You can go on and on about Clemente and his importance. And, the 55 top set is one that I like a lot. I think a lot of people collect it. Sometimes you have a little push and pull between 55 and 56. I love both of them. I love collecting both of them. As a color guy, the 55 set is, one of the ones that I was first drawn to. And as a kid that I really collected a lot. A lot of them are, a little more accessible than some of the other sets, in part because the populations are a little higher. Jonathan, I think you and I may diverge a little bit on our view, but I feel like one of the things that maybe makes the Clemente a little, higher on our list and a little more important as compared to the Koufax is its substantially smaller population. I think you feel like the higher the pop, maybe the more iconic and the better place on the list. I feel like the lower pop makes it a little more important, a little more of a chase card, a little more valuable. But I don't know. I can see both sides of that. But for me, the fact that this has 7,000 in the PSA pop and the Koufax has a little over 11,000, makes this one a tougher card. And, I think they're equally iconic and equally recognizable, but this one's tougher to get, more valuable, and, a little more heavily collected.
It's an interesting take. For me, I agree, though, that the Clemente is higher, just in part because of the mystique around him. What an incredible player, the way he died and was immediately voted into the Hall of Fame. There's some some of that tragedy that wraps him in an aura of, and like you said, being the first mega star who is Latino in the game. And, even for him early in his career to have been called Bob on most of his cards. And I love that the rookie has him as Roberto, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But a lot of the subsequent sets had him as Bob.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot going for it. Beautiful card.
Yeah, this was one too where I feel like we had a lot of influence from JT from July Tango Whiskey. He was, I had the card at 13, so I had it like just off the list because it was like, I feel like for me, I'm a bit of a contrarian or whatever on the rookie card thing, and that plus the fact that I just love I love his 56 Topps card with him like making the catch right at the outfield wall. That's my favorite card of Roberto Clemente by a lot, and so, but I do. Disagree and commit on the, it's a rookie card, telling the story of cards of the era. It's definitely the more important card. And just the fact that, at least for me, the fact that I love the 56 so much kind of like pulls the 55 down. But yeah, he's got the statue in the Hall of Fame with Rick and Gehrig, man. And Jackie, so he's got to be on the list.
All right, let's hit number 6. This one, I was surprised we didn't have a lot of debate around whether it should have been higher. It felt like, and you guys have to remind me if we were all kind of agreed on the general neighborhood of where we had it. But this is the 1951 Bowman Mickey Mantle rookie. And, I would say the biggest thing this card has going for it is Mickey Mantle. I think his name is bigger than even the player. I've argued this before. When we were all growing up, hearing about the baseball cards that you chased or that your friend's uncle had in the back closet, it was a Mickey Mantle, and he was larger than life in a bunch of different ways. And this is his rookie card. And I wondered if it would end up higher on the list, but as we get into it, there's a number of cards that we all agreed should be higher, but including a Mickey Mantle. But this one at number 6 felt about right to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I had it just a couple slots lower at either 7 or 8. I think I had it at 8. In part because it was the second Mantle card on the list, but when there was a push to put it a little higher, and like you said, Jonathan, I wouldn't have been surprised if there would have been a push to even get it to 4 or 5, but I think we did kind of pretty quickly settle out to that being the right spot for what everyone can imagine. I don't think it's a huge shocker that this, there's another Mantle still to come on the list. So
yeah, it's an interesting point, right? Because like we were talking about, making this list is difficult when there's only 12 cards you can choose, but it's even made more difficult by the fact that there's cards that you just have to have on the list or else you look like a freaking idiot. And so like there's those cards, and once you have those cards, then it's like, this card was one of those that like, yeah, it had to be on the list, and it's pretty clear that it's maybe not like at the very tip top, but it's a hugely important card for the era, and I think we got it right. I think my initial list, I think I had it at 8 or 9, but feel very comfortable with here at 6.
Yep. All right.
Yep.
Top 5,
So,
Nate.
Yeah, number 5. Our buddy Luke Bleecker Street does not need to disown us. We do have the 1948 Leaf Satchel Paige here coming in at number 5. So, this card, as we talked about a little bit, and, it almost might have made sense for us to talk about this and the 49 Bowman kind of at the same time, because we sort of did that when we were placing them. But we had a lot of discussion. We ultimately agreed that there's Luke finally, that at least one Satch was going to be on the list, right? And then we ended up we're getting some talk here. Luke said finally, Southern Collector said redemption, and David Chase said open your eyes, Satch. Bob Feller must have told him a good joke there, David, because they were sitting in the dugout by each other laughing, and Satch hadn't quite reopened his eyes yet. But so we knew we were going to have one Satch, and then I think Jonathan, right, you kind of felt like 1 was the right number and you preferred the 49, but I think you were getting some pushback from the other 3 of us and quickly kind of got on board and put the second one on. And then I think you just slotted it in at 5 and we were all like, yeah, that seems right. Because we kind of, the rest of the list had sort of taken shape. It's one like we talked about a little bit before where I think, you could make the case to put it lower because it's so unattainable for a lot of collectors. The PSA population is under 200. It's, a short print from the Leaf set, and, it's really rare and really expensive. And, so a lot of people and the image, as David has made the point here a couple times, aesthetically, it's hard to make the case that it's a better looking card than the 49 Bowman, right? I think most people would probably agree with that. For me, this was my ultimate post-war Grail card. I love Satch. I love his significance in the game, his importance in the history, both of the Negro Leagues and then making it as one of the first major league guys. The fact that it's a short print and so hard to come across like this, this was my ultimate Grail, the post-war card that I wanted more than any other because of who Satch was, my love for the Leaf set, and the fact that it was such a hard card to get. I didn't think I was probably ever going to get one. I ended up just kind of working out, and I feel really lucky to have it. But I see a lot of people say, I have the 49 Bowman. I love that card, and I feel perfectly good with that card because for the image on the Satch and the amount of money you have to spend, it's just not a card that I'm going to have in my collection. So I was a proponent. I think I had it 4 on my list, but it felt like 5 ended up kind of around the right spot.
Yeah, I think this one we also had a lot of influence from JT on it. I had it at 10.
Yeah.
Because of the accessibility reason. But it is one of those cards where if you think about yourself like walking through the card show and you see one, it's a big deal to see one, right? And furthermore, finding one that doesn't have like googly eyes where like the registration is good is so tough, right? Because there's so few cards to begin with. And then to find one that has good eye appeal is extremely challenging. And so I'm glad I at least know somebody who has one, because I definitely don't think that you have one, Nate. But I definitely don't think it's going to be a card. Like, I'm not expecting it to get anytime soon. I would love to get one someday, but it is definitely a banger for sure. Definitely.
And I'm okay with where it ended on our list, but for me, it was definitely capitulation, not conviction. I just wanted Nate to keep being my friend. So I pretty quickly was like, all right. But I'll tell you, this was my argument. I came into the conversation saying we shouldn't have 2 rookies of any one player. That means pick one Jackie Robinson rookie and pick one Satchel Paige rookie. And it was easy for me to conclude, Jackie, we should choose the Leaf. Such an important card, iconic card. In Satchel, we should choose the 49 Bowman. It's more beautiful, and then you get a variety of sets. And so that was the point of view I brought into the conversation with my list. But in the end, they both made the list.
Yeah. And yeah, Matthew, I think you're right. I think JT had it quite high as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, had it around the same. Yeah. And yeah, your point about the card show is an interesting one too. It's one of the, I mean, maybe the only post-war card where at the National, like, collectors are talking about, is there one in the room? Are there 2? Where are they? Who has them? Because usually there's like 5 guys that are kind of after one, and like, you kind of know where the Jackies, or I'm sorry, where the Satches, the Leaf Satches are in the room, and that it's pretty significant when that's the case. I don't think there's any other card there is even in consideration that. Yeah. For that kind of title at the National.
Certainly from the era. Yeah.
Yeah, right. From the era. Yeah. Post-war. Golden era. Yep.
All right, Matthew, number 4.
All right. Number 4 is 1951 Bowman Willie Mays rookie card. So, now we're here in the top 4. It's going to get into like kind of chalk territory where, it's going to be the cards that are like everyone recognizes as being really critical. For me, this is a card that I've been in love with this card for so long. It's ridiculous. I think it's just a really pretty card. I love the image of him, the intensity. I think that I've always been really appreciative of, like, you can see kind of like the reflection of the light off of his forearm and his knuckles. And just like he kind of has that like real look of like just real determination. And it's just, he's definitely, statistically and in my opinion the best player of the era. And this is in my opinion his most important card. I like it a lot more than the 52 tops, which I also love a lot. But for me, I had, this was one that, obviously had to be on the list, and it was just really a question of like, where does it land? And I think, one kind of tricky thing with him is the fact that, there is at least emotionally, people kind of either prefer this card or they prefer the 52 tops. And really the kind of, the fact that he has these two really awesome cards with not a super well-defined, or well-established, one is the card. I think that's the thing that makes it maybe brings it down a little bit. I don't remember where it was in the PWCC top 100, but I remember it being kind of like lower than I would have thought. And I think the rationale really was kind of this idea that, he has kind of multiple really big cards. And so, yeah, you want to highlight the comment there, Jonathan?
Yeah, David Chase is saying it's interesting that we have it ahead of the 51 Bowman Mantle by a large margin. And yeah, I don't know if we thought about it, but that's one where the Mantle, I think, does have a little bit higher of a premium in the market in terms of the cost. But I think that gap has been closing. But yeah, I think we all think of this as the better card in part because there's another Mantle that's also, significantly more iconic than his rookie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how those are flipped, right? With the 52 tops Mantle being the clearly better, more iconic, more desirable Mantle, and the 51 Bowman, I'd say, being pretty clearly the most desirable and popular, or I'm sorry, Maze, being the most desirable. Yeah. And I really, the images maybe have something to, but the short print on the Mantle, because the populations are almost kind of reversed. It's like there's 3,000 Bowman Mantles and 2,052 tops. And with Maze, there's like a little over 2,000 of the 51 Bowman and about 3,000 of the 52 tops. So the scarcity is also, I don't think that's purely a coincidence. The short print on the Mantle, I think it's a great image too, but I think that had a lot to do with it. I'm one of the ones, I think I'm in a fairly small minority that does prefer the 52 tops Maze. Just aesthetically, I just can never get, I just can't get into the 51 Bowman Maze. I want to. I've tried so many times. I think I'm maybe the only person I know that doesn't like it aesthetically, but that big brown tarp in the background, I just struggle with it. I can't get there on it. I'm hoping that someday I will. But that said, I didn't argue against it because I don't dispute that it's the better and more popular card, and I think it ended up in a good spot. The thing that I really hoped on the list was that it would end up at 4 behind the card that ended up at 3. So that I would have battled, and I may have battled a little bit for that, but that was the only thing that I kind of cared about relative to that placement.
Before Matthew hits 3, I want a quick personal anecdote. The day I met Nate was in Atlantic City. He was waiting in line at the National to get Dr. J's autograph. And I went and found him in the crowd, and he had just made a deal, and I had just made a deal, and we showed each other the cards. I had just bought this card, and he had just bought his 52 tops Maze, and we both admired each other's cards, and a friendship was born.
And I'll say, Jonathan, if any example of that card was ever going to make me fall in love with it, I might be hopeless, because when you brought yours out that day, I was like, oh my God, that thing was just glistening and sparkling and like perfectly centered. I mean, that you have just a remarkable example of that card. So
I was feeling
we had no choice but to be friends when you pulled that out within just a few seconds of us meeting in person.
All right. So next one up. So actually I had this one lower than I had the Maze higher than this card, but that speaks to the powers of Nate's persuasion, I guess. But the number 3 card is the 1954 tops Hank Aaron. And so, this is, it's a stunning card. The card, this is a case, especially for, stepping aside, the difference in kind of performance between Aaron and Mays, right? Like, you talk about what is Hank Aaron's best card? It's indisputable that it's the 1954 Topps Aaron. It's just such an iconic card with that like classic like punch of orange that you get. I mean, it's immediately recognizable. Of course, there are many of them. It's worth noting to the experts in the audience that it's very difficult to find a centered one. It's very difficult to find one that is like centered, good color, good registration. Not easy. 54 Topps is notorious as for kind of tilted cards and things like that. But also Hank Aaron, right? I mean, he broke freaking Babe Ruth's record. So maybe even if you argue that Mays was the better player, the fact that that home run record just means so much to baseball. And this is a special card. It's definitely a really, really special card. And so David Chase he says, ahead of the 51 Bowman Mays / Mantle and the 52 Jackie? No way. So see, that's the interesting thing is that, as we're pointing out that the 52 Jackie, he's got multiple cards that are pretty amazing. Mays and Mantle also both have cards that are pretty amazing. And Hank Aaron doesn't. Right, he has one card that is like recognized as the Hank Aaron, and that's why we have him at number 3.
Your card is so beautiful, Matthew. It hurts me that I don't have this card. I once had one, but I needed to upgrade. And I also feel that the pop favors this card being high. It's such an important card, and it's a card that a lot of people have. And I mean, like you said, he broke Babe Ruth's record. I feel really good about this card at 3.
Yeah, Jonathan, you'll attest to the challenges of finding a nice eye appeal example of that one, right? How many of those have you looked at and trying to replace we're looking for you too.
Hundreds.
It's tough.
Yeah. It's tough.
It's not easy. Yeah, the pop is high, but the pop of centered high eye appeal examples of that one is really it's a tough set and a tough card. And yeah, right. For me, you guys said it well. I mean, it's the Hank Aaron card, and it's not close, right? Like that is the card. For so many other people on the list, you can make arguments at least for another card. And Jonathan, I think, kind of what you were saying is right with the pop on this one too, with it being such an important player, with it being the card for him, with it being a beautiful card. It feels to me, like if I had to say, like, what's the one post-war card that you kind of need to have in your collection? What's the most fundamental, foundational post-war card that everyone should have? This is the card I would pick.
I love that, Nate. Yeah, I love.
Yeah, who he was and the importance of this card for him and the beauty of this card. It's just one that you just have to have. And Jonathan, I'm not saying it's bad because you have to have the right one for your collection, and I know you will. But like I just like give yourself whatever number of thousands of dollars you're going to take to start a post-war collection and make a list, and this card has got to be on there, right? Like it's just too important.
Totally.
You can pick a different Mantle, you can pick a different Mays, you can pick a different Jack. Everyone has their favorites among those, but this one's big.
Yeah, to kind of emphasize what you're saying there too, Nate. I remember, I traded away my previous example to get my 52 Mantle, and I felt like not having one was basically like a vintage hobbyist identity crisis, right? It was like, oh my God, like I just felt like destabilized, not having one of these because it's such like a foundational card, for the era. Yeah, sure.
All right, folks in the chat, we're gonna hit card number 2. Start typing in your guess. I bet. We've got a bunch of folks in the chat, and I'm guessing they all know what's coming at number 2, but Nate's going to present.
I'd like to be able to give us a big surprise on this one, but I don't think I'm going to do that in our number 2 card. And I think we very quickly got to our number 1 and our number 2, right? And I think there was really broad and quick consensus on that, and I think we have the right answer on it. And so, yes, as David Chase has guessed, Jackie. So the 1948 Leaf Jackie Robinson is our number 2 card on the list. And, what more can be said about this one? I think maybe what I'll open with is I watched the Sports Card Investor. I'm sorry to reference that on here, but video of with him with Ken Kendrick, with who has maybe the best collection in the world. I don't know, top 2 or 3. I mean, he has to have the best collection. He has the Wagner, the Gretzky Wagner. He has the both Manels in a 10, the rookie and the 52 top.
Ridiculous.
I mean, he's just like insane collection. And Jeff asked him, of all these cards, the 1914 Shields, which one's your favorite? Without hesitation, my 1948 Leaf Jackie. Like and so many people feel that way, right? Like this card is so significant for so many people. You go to the National, you talk to 10 people who this is their number one card on their list. It's another one that feels so, fundamental to have in the collection. And when you get one in the collection, your collection feels different. Like it's gone to a different level, and just to kind of recap briefly, main reasons the 48 Leaf set was a groundbreaking set, beautiful, important. Jackie coming into the league, first African-American ball player, first card of a African-American ball player. And the back, which Matthew is showing, first Negro player in modern organized baseball. So, that historic moment, I think the consensus is captured most essentially by this card. And that's why we have it at number 2.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I have any. I think that was really well said, Nate. I will say that it's a card that took me a little bit of time to come around to, because I don't love the image. I don't think it's flattering, and Jackie was a pretty amazing looking individual, but it's just so dang important. It's just so important, and you could not have a museum with a wing dedicated to this era of the hobby and not have this card in it. You just couldn't.
Yeah, totally agree. Nothing else to add. That card speaks for itself. Beautiful example, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
All right, Matthew, you and I are going to share our examples of the top card. I think nobody disagreed on the list. It was going to be the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. And I think there's not a lot you have to say about this card. And there's a whole lot of mythology around it. And, it was short print because it was in the high set. And, did most of them get dumped into the Hudson River? Maybe. But what I would say about this card is I think of every card in the hobby, certainly from the golden era, this is the one where non-collectors, people that have very little interest in baseball cards, would recognize the image, they'd recognize the name, and it kind of just symbolized what a baseball card is, certainly what a chase card is. And it's one of those where I think the colors on it and the portrait just makes you stop and stare when you walk by and see one in a display. And yeah, it feels like an honor to own one of this card.
Yeah, that's really well said, Jonathan. I feel similarly. It's like this is the card that you can't argue that it's not the number one card. It is. It's foundational to the whole hobby. I mean, it's just an amazing card, and I agree with you that I feel lucky to own one, and I love looking at it. I look at it very regularly because it's just such a cool card. It's awesome. It's so awesome.
I love both of your examples so much. They look so beautiful on the screen. Really, really nice.
Yeah, they do.
I agree. For the list that we're making, there's no argument, no colorable argument. I mean, can you think about Jackie from some perspectives, maybe, but the Leaf Jackie, but I think it's quickly shot down when no matter how you define this list, this has to be the number one card. I think the only somewhat interesting debate about this card is it the most important, best card ever in the hobby? And at least there are a couple contenders, because you have the Wagner and maybe the 86 Fleer Jordan. And I think, those were the top 3 on the PWCC Iconic 100 that Adam Gray did. And this was I think this was number 1, Wagner was 2, and the Jordan was 3. And that's the order that I would agree with as well. I think even when you expand it to all cards ever made and not just golden era baseball cards, I think the Mick is still reasonably clearly, reasonably quickly the number one card for the reasons you guys stated.
Other than Luka Doncic, Prism rookie, agreed.
Yeah. But that's why it was fun coming up with this list, right? It felt like, we had these cards at the very tip top that we just kind of knew had to be in the tip top. And then it was like that we ironed that out pretty fast. And then it was the rest of it was where it kind of got tricky, right?
Yep.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
right.
Well, this was a lot of fun. We'll have to find another one of these lists to do at some point in time. I think the researching of it and all the engagement we got from folks in the comments was great. And this will be posted to YouTube, and I'd love to hear from folks that go check out this episode in the comments. What other cards would you have added? Which ones hurt for you not to include? Warren Spahn didn't make the list. 53 tops didn't make the list. No card from 1956 or later made the list. So there was a lot of tough things to exclude, but I think we did a pretty good job.
Yep. Good recap, Jonathan. Thanks to everyone who joined us and participated so much in the chat. I think that made it a lot more fun and lively. Enjoyed the whole exercise. Thanks again to JT, July Tango Whiskey, who joined us and helped us put together this list. I think his input was really valuable, and as always, loved doing this with you guys.
Yep, super fun. Yeah, just want to shout out. Yeah, a lot of great comments, both on Instagram and here over on YouTube. And yeah, I'd love to reach out to any of us. Let us know what we screwed up. Give us your amicus briefs on where we what we messed up. I would love to get into it, because it's tricky. It's fun. It makes it real fun.
All right, I'll see you guys.
All right, take care, guys.
Bye.